But this is our space, and this is what we do, and we try to cultivate these conversations that produce important knowledge for us to share and to deepen our awareness of what's going on around us. And so this project has been coming for a while. Josie and I were talking about it, and it's really nice to see it come to fruition. We had a fourth panelist who was supposed to join us, which is Pat Daly from DC, and because of some surgery and medical stuff, she wasn't able to join us. Did she send anything for you?
Not as of a minute ago, but she gave me permission to share some of the things that she's told me in the last few days.
Okay, excellent.
So she's here in spirit.
Perfect, perfect. So we have
I'll
a fourth
keep checking.
panelist who's here in spirit. So we have Sue Ross, who's presented several times and is known throughout Atlanta and the world as a photo griot and someone who documents a lot of the things we'll be talking about today. And so we appreciate you coming, and Josie Harding and Walene Dodson coming from Michigan. And so the three of you all were participants and activists and leaders in various capacities we're going to hear more about in the Institute of the Black World. And one of the things we've been doing in this discussion series is trying to learn more about the IBW. Part of my job as the teacher and organizer here is to do what Walter Rodney called grounding, so trying to ground ourselves in local Atlanta history. So the IBW seems like one of those really important organizations. I made the mistake of calling it an institution to a fellow sociologist, and then we got into a discussion about what constitutes an institution. So it was an alternative organizational space that was not intended by the powers that be to ever exist. It was created oppositionally. I've learned a lot about it over the years. We've had Derek White give 2 different lectures here. We've had Vincent Harding, and we've had Bill Strickland, and we've had Bobby Hill, and others who were active in the IBW come and speak with us. We've noticed, the preponderance of male leadership in some of the folks who were there then. We've wanted to expand the conversation. That has something to do with this panel here as well. I am a relatively new student of what the IBW was, and so Josie suggested that I introduce just by talking about broadly what the IBW was, because I'm sure it'll be a limited perspective, and then you all can riff on that and expand on it. And so my basic understanding and what I've gotten from talking to folks and reading a little bit is that around 68, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, Vincent Harding was a close associate and friend of King's, ended up starting the Institute of the Black World and the King Center around the same time. And within about a year, they had separated off, largely because of politics, and because the politics of the Institute of the Black World were openly progressive and asking a lot of difficult and challenging questions that were part of the global black struggle at the time. And the corporate sponsorship and the direction that was coming in for the King Center ended up forcing those 2 things to be somewhat separate. That's a perspective that I've gotten. I knew that in '68 you had student movements shutting down, and we read about that here as well. The movements here on the AUC campus, occupying buildings, locking the trustees in a room, stuff that we don't do so much these days and look at. It's like, I mean, I will say some of my students are actually shutting down highways, which is pretty bold. But yeah, locking trustees in a room without a bathroom and saying we need some signatures
Daddy
before.
King.
Yeah, heavy stuff, right? And so yeah. So I knew that happened in '68. I knew San Francisco State had major things going on. We know about the rise of the Black Panther Party and the overlap, the civil rights and Black Power movements. But what I wasn't clear on is how significant the IBW, the Institute of the Black World, was in the formation of everything that came from '68 afterwards. We know that the rise of Black Studies comes around '68, along with the student movements. But I came to learn that the Institute of the Black World was not only producing knowledge and having forums and getting people together, but was also forming itself as a consultancy that could legitimize Black Studies in schools that were not ready for Black Studies, where students demanded it so they could come in and evaluate and promote the development of Black Studies around the country. And it makes a lot of sense, because as organic as social change can be, it did seem very much, as an outsider, how did all this happen in '68? How did all these schools pop up in '68 and '69 and '70? All of a sudden, Black Studies or ethnic studies or some kind of studies pops up on all these campuses. How was that not coordinated? Come to find out, of course, it was coordinated, and there was an organizing effort to take place behind the scenes. So those are some of the things I learned about the Institute of the Black World, as a space also that, because of its politics, wasn't even really welcome for the most part on the campuses that it was surrounded by. And that's pretty typical of a lot of the activism that we see, that if it's too connected to the community, that the institutions oftentimes will not fund them, or will only do so reluctantly, or you'll have to actually go off campus to get those kinds of things done. So we've had people in the IBW talk about how the actual space was really just across the street from this library. And so we know it went through the 70s and into the very early 80s. We know that the work was so effective that, like other organizations, the FBI started not just surveilling but disrupting and breaking in, and eventually the group dispersed. But for a long time it made a huge impact. And when you look through the books on IBW, you see a who's who of then and now leading black thinkers, people who back then were already really significant, and people back then who were students who went on to really significant careers in a variety of things, the arts, sciences, scholarship. And so it also seemed to be a space where some of the best minds came together and garnered inspiration and took that with them afterwards. So that's the basic idea. And the other thing, as you read about it, is it's hard not to read about the IBW and these rare moments like that and not think about how, do we have something like that now? Is there an IBW today? Is there anything akin to it? And if there isn't, what does that vacuum mean? And how would we create an IBW today? It might not be the IBW, but it would be some kind of organizational structure. And we've even talked in this space about what is this space we've cultivated here around Walter Rodney and the work that we're doing with the foundation and the lectures and the symposia. And how does, what's needed even at this time in history. So those are things that I think we all think about when we read about this part of history and recover it. So part of the recovery of that history is the role of women in all of what happened, and reclaiming that as well. So with that in mind, with that very brief, broad introduction, I just want to hand it over to you all in whatever order you wanted to go. Josie's really the organizer, or co-organizer, main organizer of this, so I'm going to pass it over to you. But thank you all for coming. Maybe we can start with a round of applause to thank
Well, Arlene and I talked, because Sue is a younger person. We decided I would start first. I was there, and then Marlene came, and Sue came later. So we're just going to start in that order and make some remarks. And then we wanted to have plenty of time for discussion, because that is a key part of what we believe in. Not presentations, but conversations and discussions and that kind of thing. So I'm going to start out. I'm Aljosie Aldrich Harding. And when I was at IBW, I was Aljosie Yarborough, Aljosie Yabura. So you'll see, but fortunately the name Aljosie, you can't miss me. So my mother did that part. I'm going to start out just reading a poem from someone that spoke very much to the whole idea of what we were about at IBW, and that was Mari Evans. And you may know her poem, Speak the Truth to the People. Maybe I should put my glasses back on to read this. It's called Speak the Truth to the People. It is not necessary to green the heart, only to identify the enemy. It is not necessary to blow the mind, only to free the mind. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. A free mind has no need to scream. A free mind is ready for other things, to build black schools, to build black children, to build black minds, to build black love, to build black impregnability, to build a strong black nation, to build. Speak the truth to the people. Spare them the opium of devil hate. They need no trips on honky chants. Move them instead to a black oneness, a black strength which will defend its own. A black strength which attacks the laws, exposes the lies, disassembles the structure, and ravages the very foundation of evil. Speak the truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the minds of the people. Speak truth. And that summarizes so very well for me what we were about at IBW. To speak truth to people and to put our minds and our bodies in service to the community. Not to be a think tank in the idea of some organizations that want to just think and put out information, but to be an organization that thought and worked in the ideas of service to the community. So I'm just going to say a few things here and there about me and IBW, and then as we get to the questions, we may deepen it more. Walleen suggested that we talk about how we came to IBW. Let's see, she said something about who were we and how did we decide to participate? She's my sociologist friend, right? What did we do and what did we get out of the experience and lessons learned? So I'm going to just give a few things about that. I think it's important to identify who we were when we came to IBW, because you don't just come vacant. So I came to IBW from being born in Salisbury, North Carolina in 1941, growing up in a segregated society, and going to all black schools, which was a real blessing, a real blessing. Going to schools where I lived in the community with people, where there were teachers who were well-trained, who loved me, who saw me, who valued me. Growing up in Salisbury, I don't know if you know, was Livingston College, which started out as Hood Seminary, and so that there were Africans who were there all the time and involved in the community, involved in our school. I graduated from a high school, J.C. Price High School. For those of you who don't know, you should go and find out who J.C. Price was. And my school was named for him. So my high school had pictures of Joseph Charles Price and so many other people on the walls, and I just mentioned that in terms of some of what I recognize about myself. Then after going to college in Durham, North Carolina, at North Carolina Central, I was in the Peace Corps. I was one of the early Peace Corps volunteers. And so from 1962 to 64, I was a teacher with the Peace Corps in Togo, West Africa. And I say that's where I became sane again. That experience helped me to get my sanity. So after the Peace Corps, I went to New York and I worked at the Institute of International Education, and came to Atlanta saying, what am I going to do in Atlanta? I came here married to someone who was at the School of Social Work and found the library school. And so went to AU School of Library Science and graduated. And my house actually was down the street, just on Beckwith, down the street from IBW. And I can't even say how I started at IBW, but it was that IBW was there. We were all people who were exchanging and talking and doing things, and somehow I came up there one day, and as you'll hear from IBW, we worked in a variety of capacities, and you could be a volunteer and do work as serious as anybody who was a fellow, and we were trying to come up with a better word for a fellow, a person who was a scholar or whatever, or an essential worker, or someone who was in residence. And Sue will get to all of her stuff that she's going to fill in. But I started volunteering at IBW, and somebody mentioned the Southern Education Foundation had some internships, and if you go down there, they might give you one and you could get paid for your work. So I got an internship and came to IBW, and I don't know if I was paid for a year or two, but I worked there off and on for 4 years. And so again, it didn't matter if you were paid or not in terms of the work you were doing and the variety of things that you were doing. But my primary responsibility was in doing coordinating for a Black Agenda conference that we had in the fall of 1970 in Idlewild, Michigan. And I want to go back and pull together a lot more things about that. But we gathered at IBW, we gathered in Idlewild under the support of, you may remember his name, but it's a person who invented the Afro pick. And I don't remember his name, but this is significant in the sense that we got our support from a variety of people, a variety of organizations, and a variety of means. So I was coordinating that conference up in Idlewild and doing things and running around and setting up. And so there are probably a lot of people who know a lot more about what actually happened at the conference, because as most women know, if you're coordinating and running something, sometimes you can't be in on all of the sessions. You're running in and running out and doing this and doing that. And so the other thing that was happening that was significant to me as a woman was that as I got back from this conference, I discovered I was 2 months pregnant. And so, that was part of the reason I was so stressed and crying, because they didn't. Yeah, you all ate up all the food and didn't save me any food a couple of days, and I was crying and wondering, what in the world, why am I here crying and all this stuff? But so I can't really talk a lot about the Black Agenda Conference right now, but you will know, and I want you to look it up, and I'm leaving areas for you all to do research and for us to go back and do research. But that was one of our purposes at IBW, to look at things from a Black perspective and to formulate what should be a Black agenda in this country. And Vincent and I went to the Marble, the research center at Emory, a couple years ago, and we're looking in his archives, and we found the yellow spiral notebook that I used, which was my database back in 1970, to coordinate that conference. So we had to sit there and start crying. Because, of course, to coordinate a conference in those days, a spiral notebook, phones, and snail mail, that's what you had to use.
Sometime we got into fax, remember?
God, I don't remember the facts, but I know all I remember about facts is that they were not reliable. In any case, I just wanted to mention the Black Agenda Conference, and my work primarily at IBW was work that I enjoy, is making things happen. And I say that whenever people talk about anything where there are a lot of men. We had a lot of men, we had a lot of women. We'll talk about it, and I'm going to call some names about some of the women too. But sometimes, and I don't know, this came to my mind, so I'll just say it. If it sounds ugly, it just sounds the way it sounds. Sometimes, when you're talking about work, and work that men did and work that women did, I think about somebody giving you a menu. And they give you this menu, but unless you have somebody to come along and work with the ingredients and put it together, you just have a menu. And so sometimes at IBW, I think about that. We did have Vincent and Bill and a variety of people. We also had a number of women who were just involved in the creating of ideas. We had Joyce Ladner. We had a variety of people. But that, as in many organizations, a lot of the basic work, the creation, the production of newsletters, and the running of the press, and a variety of other things, was done by the women. We were involved in discussions, and we were involved in sitting down and keeping things excellent. For example, I remember sitting there with someone hand-correcting more than 200 copies of a newsletter where the newsletter had misspelled Pettus in Edmund Pettus Bridge. And we were so serious about excellence that we sat there at a table with pens and corrected hundreds of copies so that it would not go out with misspelling Edmund Pettus Bridge. So all of these are just incidents and stories that I'm going to give you to start with. But I wanted to call the names of some of the women who were either at IBW on staff, or who came through as scholars, or who were related to us in a variety of ways. And some of those people, Farrell Thomas, who was critical to the organization. She was there from the beginning. She was Vincent's administrative secretary, but more than that, the title could never speak to what Farrell did in terms of the work. And not just Farrell, but the whole Harmon family. That was another way we operated. If you were there, your whole family was involved in some kind of way, and we came to your house, and you came to this, and the children were running around, and whatever. So later Farrell's sister, Ruth Harmon, came and managed our money. She had worked at, I can't remember now, a black school that had started in Sedalia, North Carolina. But she had worked there, but she brought her skills to IBW. So Farrell Thomas, Adisa Douglas, who was on a program last year, Mamie Mitchum, Joyce Ladner, Lynn Saruma, Pat Daly, Faye Bellamy Powell, Ruth Harmon, Jan Douglas, Sharon Burke, Jillian Royce, Sue Ross, Wallene Dotson, Malika Adero, Betty Cheney, Colette Hopkins, Louise Jackson Williams, and many, many more. We had women from the schools volunteering, we had fellows, but some of the women who came in for various periods of time, whether it was a few days or more than that, some of the women that we had the opportunity to listen to and to talk to and to learn from: Elizabeth Catlin, Catherine Dunham, Grace Lee Boggs, Margaret Walker Alexander, Mary Frances Berry, Bernice Johnson Reagan, and on and on and on. And I remember Katherine Dunham especially because I was just in awe of Katherine Dunham, the dancer anthropologist, as she led a discussion and talked to us and moved around and everything. And Elizabeth Catlett gave IBW a series of her prints so that we could use them as fundraiser. And so we have prints on our walls, many of us, that were donated by Elizabeth Catlett so that she could support the work. And Margaret Walker Alexander talked about Richard Wright and talked about knowing him and working with him in a writers project in Chicago. So just imagine this, the whole learning setting. IBW was a place where you learned, and a place where you grew, and a place where you had the opportunity to test some ideas and raise questions, and we weren't always just sitting there quiet about that. But out of IBW also came not just IBW itself, but again, our extended community, the Learning House. And I mention that quite often. The Learning House was a community school that was founded by Lynetta Gaines and Amoywa Skaggs. And those of us who had children, our children went to the Learning House. Our children went to an Afrocentric school. And so they were getting the kind of training that we wanted our children to have, and they were mingling with us and coming to activities, and we were supporting that school. So those of us many times who were working at IBW had to leave and go pick up our kids or go do some support activity for Learning House. So we were connected to various institutions. There was also an organization in the community called the Guardians, and it was an organization, as I remember, primarily run by women. I know Farrell was involved and Rose Harding, and I remember interviewing Alonzo Krim as he came in to be superintendent of schools here. So we were involved not just at IBW, but involved in the community and building, I don't want to call institutions if that's not what Learning House was.
Organizations.
An organization, well, call it a school, building Learning House, I know that. So those are another variety of ways that we did things at IBW. Why did I come? I came because I was called. I came to support the work. What did I learn? I learned so many, many things. I learned I always knew, what shall I say? At IBW, I had an opportunity to meet people who had minds equal to anybody's mind in the country. I was in a setting where I knew that what we were doing, the work was very important. If I had not known it, I would have known it as the FBI was breaking in and destroying us and all that. That was validated. But I knew we were doing important work, and I knew that we were putting our minds and our bodies at service to the community. And that was what was so important to me about working at IBW. And it extended. IBW was not just an institution, it was a community. And it was a community in the sense that this dress that I'm wearing today is a dress that was brought to me in 2014 when my husband Vincent Harding died. My sister came from Michigan to Colorado, and she brought me this dress to wear to a program. And so I say that to mention that we've developed community and we developed relationships that have extended over many, many years. And so we go forth and we take that energy, and I give that energy to my young sisters who are sitting over there, that they allow me to be part of a women's circle, and I can tell them things about IBW and continue to encourage them as they grow their homeschooling community. And so IBW lives. Thank you.
No, I didn't miss the beat, but I'm getting full up. I'm getting full up because of all the stuff she said. I'm going to say so. When the tears start flowing, just know it's because it's good tears. But Ward Churchill is here, and I moved to Colorado to be on faculty at University of Colorado. But I had met Ward beforehand in Cuba, which is where the center of much of my work has been. And I was flabbergasted at the meeting because there were all these racial ethnic people there, and it would never have happened in the United States, all of those folks coming together to talk about race and racism. In the United States, never. But in Cuba, we got there. So when he walked in, I just about flipped out, because from there I went to Colorado, where he was directly linked to my being hired, and from that I was on the faculty, and he was there literally, because he's really tall, you know, he can't help it. But he was there to lift me up when I was in some pretty bad places, because I am an academic, and there's no doubt in my mind. But the truth of the matter is, I did not accept the intellectual calling of my own self until I came to IBW. So the question Al Josie puts on the table, and she says, I put it on the table, I'm gonna give it right back and say she put it on the table, is how I came to IBW. And I was born in Pensacola, Florida. And if any of you know anything, that's a Geech land, because it's right on the water, the Gulf. And then my other half of my family is from Low Country, South Carolina. So that's the other side of the Geech part. So as my friend Robert Hall tells me, you didn't have a choice on what's the study and culture of black people, honey. You Geech 4 times around, what do you expect? But my family did move to California, and I stayed with my grandmother. Eventually they came and got me, and I moved to California as well. The good thing about moving to California, as my daddy said, was I would be going to schools that were good, because at California at that time they did not have legalized racial segregation. Believe me, it was still segregated, but it wasn't legalized. But the schools in California were good, not because they weren't segregated, but because California was out to prove itself that they had good schools, and they were dumping money into schools, dumping it, and so you got good education. I started at San Francisco State College. I became a single parent and dropped out. And then when I dropped out, after my daughter was born, 6 weeks, my mother said, now you're gonna go back to school, right? And then my daughter got to be 6 months. Now you're gonna go back to school, right? My daughter got to be a year. Now you're gonna go back to school, right? I think my mom was trying to say something to me. But the point was, I did go back to school because there were resources to support me in doing that. I went back to San Francisco State, took political science, was going to be a lawyer. And the political science, I was taking theory, and the political science instructor said, Berkeley wants some good black kids, you know, he just said Negroes, with good minds, and they're willing to pay money. I said, that's my name. So I transferred over to Berkeley. It was my last semester at San Francisco State. So if you ask me about myself, I would always tell you, I learned to think and learn, 2 different things. How to think and how to learn at San Francisco State. And then when I got to Berkeley, I just started refining that process. And by the time I was finishing my bachelor's degree, I went to see the only black instructor I'd ever had since I left Florida, which was Troy Duster. And I said, this isn't gonna work because I don't know nothing. So I can't leave school, I got to stay in school. My grandmama and my granddaddy sent me to learn. And I'm gonna just take the master's degree, stay in school, and then I can teach at a junior college. And he said, that's not gonna happen because that brain of yours is going to want more. Now you may think this is roundabout, but it comes together. And he said, you're gonna apply, and he gave me 4 schools to apply, and he wrote letters, and I got accepted at all 4. When it was time to decide, I decided to stay at Berkeley, because in Berkeley, my mama was in the town, in the area, my sister was in the area, and before my brothers went to prison, they were in the area, and my grandfather was in the area, and I had, the point was, if I'd gone to Boston, or if I'd gone to Evanston, I knew no one. I'd never been snow, I'd never seen cold. I'm from Pensacola, Florida, and I had this baby child. And where I come from, in the culture of African American U.S., you don't put your children in the hands of strangers. And if I was in those places, that's what was going to happen. I said, okay, so I stayed at Berkeley. After my first year, I was totally nuts. There's no other way to say it. I was crazy as a loon after my first year of graduate school, because they were coming at me left side, right side, upside, downside, overward side. Just get rid of whoever it was that you were. You're no longer a co-child. You are no longer a black child. You are no longer a woman. You are. And I'm saying, I don't think so. So I was pretty crazy. And IBW was opening up. This was in '69. Yes, IBW was opening up. And I went into graduate school, finished my first year of graduate school, '69 into '70, married my husband, ex-husband now. And Andy Billingsley said, you can come go to Atlanta with me, because I'm going to be at the Institute of the Black World. I never heard of the Institute of the Black World. With all honesty, I hardly heard of Martin Luther King. I was in San Francisco. We didn't do that stuff, right? And that's honest. I'm not trying to be funny. But he said, Atlanta. I said, oh, I need money because I got this baby and blah, 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 blah. And went back to Troy, and he said, and put the money on fellowship so we could go, husband, daughter, to Atlanta. We arrived in Atlanta in the summer, into the summer of 1970. Very significant. This is when life did like this for me. It was the first or second meeting of the Pan-African Congress. I think it was two, right? I don't remember now. But it was a Pan-African Congress that was meeting across the street from Morris Brown. There was some sort of auditorium there, it doesn't matter. Just was
a Congress of African Peoples, right?
Congress of African People, my problem. Congress of African People, Baraka, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the Congress of African People. So we get into town and everybody's walking around, Black Power, Angawa, Black Power. I'm like, okay, Gawa Power. And Tanvi, who was a sister from South Africa running away not to get killed before going home, took us in to let us stay. And then she gave us a piece of artwork. Now, I'm saying all of this to add to the stuff that was going on at the time. And you all may ask, well, why is it this stuff isn't going on now? And I've had scholars and other people say, it's different when there's a movement happening. And that movement had begun before the Congress of African People. It had begun, for nothing else, it had begun at San Francisco State with the Black Studies movement. At Berkeley, we had, I got my head busted, Black Studies movement at Berkeley. But you all, there's not a movement right now. And you might say, well, why isn't there a movement? I said this a few minutes ago, a little while ago, and I'll say it now, and you can take it as you like. When African descendants in the United States came out of the 19th century as free people, we were no longer enslaved. We had never, as a people, encountered any of the stuff that we encountered. We didn't know what it meant. We could walk down the street and didn't have to say, yes, boss, get off the street, or any of that. This was new. What I'm saying to you, and you can go for a long ways with that, and I have many stories. This millennium right now, where we are in the 28th day of the 4th month of the 16th year of the 21st century, mirrors what was going on at a similar point in time at the turn of the 19th and 20th. We are in a place as a people, and it's not just African people, right? My sisters and brothers in Native communities, they're trying to figure out what next. They had some, okay. The point is, it's brand new. And that's one. The second point is, as we came, and this is an IBW, but I gotta say it. As we came out of the desegregation movement, and we sent all of you all to integrated schools, we sent you there without your lunchbox. So you got there, and they said free lunch, and you went and ate what they had and drank their Kool-Aid. Prior to that, we never sent our children any place without their lunchbox. Oh, yeah, and more often, but even when they didn't, because I remember listening to Higginbotham, he lived on campus at Rutgers, but he knew where to go on the weekends so that he could keep his sanity. The point I'm trying to make is, you all have been sent to school, and now you're in graduate school, and you still don't have the lunchbox that your community fixed for you. Why? Because this generation, we assumed the federal government was our friend, and they were going to help us move and take care of us. So we didn't even make your lunchbox. So not only don't you have it, you don't even know what goes in it. You don't know what it looks like. Do you follow me? And so they give you the Kool-Aid, you drink it. And so you drink the Kool-Aid and buy your BMW, you say, I have arrived. No, I'm speaking metaphorically, but I'm quite serious. At any rate, I was crazy. I came to Atlanta. All these things were going on. Congress of African People, Tande from South Africa was fighting apartheid. I didn't even know where daggum South Africa was. And I was a full-grown woman now. Don't get on, I wasn't no baby child. And there were other things that were going on. All right. Came there. AJ put together the Idlewild Conference. And I said, do we get to go? Well, now hear well, my husband, my ex-husband and I, Doug Davidson, Ida Faye Rousseau, who else? 4 of us at least, there were some more, but there were, Dorsey, 5 of us, came out of Berkeley, and we were here. And at IBW, my ex and I were the assistants, research assistants in graduate school. So that meant we get to go to Idlewild. Well, that was cool. I'd never been to Idlewild before in my life. I don't even know that I'd been to Michigan. We went to Idlewild. I got enraptured because we were landing. Were you on our plane? When we got ready to land and all those brown, red, gold, red, yellow, orange trees looked like lollipops? Okay. I thought I had a box of gumdrops that was sitting right there, and I was going to have some of them gumdrops. They were so beautiful. Got up there, and Robert Williams, do you all know Robert Williams? Robert Williams was the son. Yeah, I got the man who said, I got a gun and I'll shoot you with it. And then he shot his wife. His wife, Muriel, came to us at Michigan State, and we did one of these kind of conversations where she reiterated the story that she learned how to shoot the gun. But anyway, Robert Williams was on the run, and because Idlewild was so close to Canada, he slipped on in. And I said, a criminal! I didn't know. I really didn't. I'm exposing my ignorance to let you know, doesn't matter when you jump on to get yourself enlightened, jump on and get yourself enlightened. Any rate, I went to Idlewild, that was wonderful. She mentioned several things that we did at IBW, but there was also the Black Psychology Conference, right? I think you have pictures on that one, that came out of Los Angeles with the Fanon Institute. And we were attempting to understand what is the psychology, the systematic study of people's minds who are of African descent, who have lived through and under colonialism. And the Fanon Institute of Los Angeles had gotten started. And they came and we were talking about what is black psychology. And my first recollection of women came at that conference when they were talking and talking and talking. And I'm sitting back listening. And I said, well, what's this got to do with women? And everybody's like, well, what? And this is IBW, all of them. Fanon, Dotson, Strickland, Harding, all of them. Turned around and said, well, I mean, that's not relevant. And I got very upset by then. I think that's when I got the stick in my back. And I said, if it's not relevant, then what you gonna do when we leave? All the women go. You know, when, what's his name, did the film, What Happens All the Blacks Are Gone? What happened if the women are gone? You ain't got doodly squat. Any rate, that psychology conference, it was a good conference, and indeed they did begin to acknowledge with earnesty that, no, they were wrong for leaving that out. And interestingly enough, on this document, which is a descriptor, kind of a flyer information stuff, they spell my name so wrong it's not even funny. It's not even funny, but it's wrong. And if nothing else, I got pissed about that because my name is very special to me. We went back to California. There were some other things I know, but we went back to California and to finish up coursework in the doctorate level. And once we finished coursework, we got the hell out of California. By that time, I could look around and know why I had to leave California because they were crazy. California is crazy. And I don't mean they have a special way of living. That too is true, but they crazy. And I knew I couldn't stay there. And the reason that they were crazy is they had no normal touchstone. There is no touchstone where you can say, okay, now I know this is the normal part and I'm gonna go do something else. They don't have a touchstone for normality. They just do whatever they want to do, create whatever they want to create. But then when we came back, I had Al Josie's, who's no longer alive, Lloyd Yabura, was
Say what?
assistant.
Her first husband. My husband, she means. That husband was no longer alive. She said, I'm no longer alive.
I apologize.
That's all right.
That wasn't what I was trying to say.
I got you.
I think I said Al Josie's no longer alive.
Okay.
But Lloyd Yabura was assistant dean of School of Social Work, and they had lost the director of their research center, and they needed someone to do that. Now, my degree is in sociology, so the assumption was I knew research, which was a correct assumption. So they hired me to direct the research center for the School of Social Work. And the blessing was Lloyd Yabura understood what that meant. And so I had no classes to teach. When you teach at historically black colleges, you got plenty classes to teach. I don't care what else you do, because eventually that did come true. I had to do other things, teach. But initially, I did not have to teach anything. My job was to run the research center, collect the data, train the students, make some more money to run the research center, collect the data, And as a consequence, I hired Susan Ross as my research assistant. That is, lead research assistant, because we had an administrative person and a research person, and we were the whatever team, and Susan was a research assistant at the Research Center for the School of Social Work. And we did good work. We did very fine work. You will not find it in any you will not find it in any impact journal. It doesn't get picked up. Doesn't mean it wasn't good work, but HBCUs there's not a presumption that they produce high caliber. And I was fighting tooth and nail to get rid of that. I had to stop that fight and go, because her mama told me to get out of Dodge at the School of Social Work. Yeah, she did. She said, no, you got to go, because if you stay here, you're going to die intellectually. But in the process, IBW also had workshops where they would bring in scholars. I don't know, Susan's pictures will show you pictures. George Beckford from the Caribbean, Walter Rodney, obviously, also from the Caribbean, Sheila Winters from the Caribbean. Sylvia Winters, sorry. Sylvia Winters from the curriculum. Oh, no, that's all right. Keep going. You're getting the picture. The one that came, and this is without knowing it why I came to IBW, the one that came that really jerked my tail was St. Clair Drake. St. Clair Drake was anthropologist. He did his degree at Roosevelt. No, he's worked at Roosevelt. His degree in Chicago in anthropology. There's a volume called Black Metropolis, and that's his opus. St. Clair Drake came there, and St. Clair Drake was a smoker. So St. Clair Drake, and he was short, he was my size. So he was talking about stuff, and then he liked this one with that one. Right? Yes, Ward. And when I first met you, I thought about St. Clair. Anyway. And St. Clair Drake and IBW's workshop, St. Clair was there, Beckford was there, Rodney was there,
Was C.L.R. James too?
I was getting there. Tran Van Den from Vietnam. Tran Van Den, we're sitting in a room. Now today it's no big deal, but in the room it was all black folks. And then there was Tran Van Den, Vietnamese man, sitting at the table. And I kept looking at him and looking at him. So finally everybody else was just being polite. I said, okay, I got a question. What are you doing here? You know, that's my bit. And he said, and this, I don't forget it, I tell it all the time. He said, I'm here because we are fighting a major revolution in Vietnam. We have been fighting it for a long, long time. We need models on how do you conduct revolution. And we looked around the world and we saw that blacks in the United States have been struggling revolutionarily for centuries. So we said, Tran, go over there and find out what they're doing and how they're getting it done. Say what? because Lerone Bennett had just been in to talk about we need long-distance runners. We have a protracted struggle going on. This is not a sprint. You can't come in and run and do what you're going to do in 2 years and then go on and be your MBA and get your money with Wall Street. No, no, no. This is long distance. When you die, your children's still going to be in struggle. Are you ready for that? And then here comes Trent Van Den and said, yeah, we had to come and figure out how to struggle because you all know how to get it done. Flabbergasted. I then had the assignment to be the assistant for C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James wrote The Black Jacobins. Well, you know, when they said that, I said, okay, what you want me to do? Right? My job, because he had very severe Parkinson's, was to drive him around, take him from there to his hotel, and then I was at his disposal. His first thing was, go get me a fifth of rum. I said, oh. And when you come back, turn the television on to the guiding light. It's the truth. So finally, after I got him the rum and I poured it, I got him nerve and I said, well, why are we watching soap operas? He says, because if you want to know what U.S. people are about, watch the soap operas. Now, I say that to you because you're trying to figure out how it is that Donald Trump can have so many followers. Watch reality TV. That's his people. And then you know. Say, that's C.L.R. James. St. Clair comes. St. Clair's chain smoking. And he's saying, the role of the black scholar, bloody, 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 as an intellectual, and then he said, now the question you need to ask is, how is it that black folks were getting PhDs in 1920s and 1930s when I was coming through? I said, yeah, that's right, how is it? He started talking about all those early black scholars, particularly in the social sciences, that I knew about, from Allison Davis, yes? Bernard, what's Bernard?
Tarsus.
No, that's white guy. I want to say Bernard Russell, Baynard, something like that. He did a thing on South, a book on etiquette in the South, him. And then Charles Johnson out of Fisk. There's a whole cadre of black social scientists before I ever got into the world who had done degrees. And he started talking about why did they do what they did. He said to get a degree, that wasn't the point. To go and to have racist people beat up on them in these white schools, that wasn't the point. He said because we had no knowledge that was grounded in who we were. And our point was to try and get that and talk about our struggle against this stuff called racial discrimination and everything else, racism, okay? And he said, and in order to get that done, we have got to have intellectuals. When I'm sitting there listening to St. Clair, short guy, smoking, and I'm thinking, because I had never, ever, ever even thought, least of all said, I was an intellectual. I come from public housing family. You know public housing where you have to go, yeah, and the roaches and rats and things, and the water came in on us. That's why I have asthma now, I'm pretty sure, because that water was coming down. Intellectual, Unions, that's different, I'll be with that. But intellectual, nope, nope. St. Clair was talking, and you had a week with St. Clair talking. From that point forward, I said, oh my gosh, I am an intellectual. I am an intellectual. And then the chore became listening inside of IBW. How is it that the intellectual doesn't go to the ivory tower and insulate themselves to do their thing? And in that regard, I don't know if it was Walter or who said, theory without practice is an exercise in futility. And practice without theory is useless. That one resonated with me. So the point is, for real struggle, you have to have intellectuals. For real struggle, you have to have community organizers. For real struggle, you better have some women. For real struggle and for protracted struggle, they have got to know what their mission is. As a consequence, and I will shut up now, I really will. I have to say this because it's so cool. She talked about dancer.
Catherine Dunham.
Catherine Dunham. I was there too. And Catherine Dunham came in, and I was in awe. First of all, she's short. was short. And secondly, she walked in and she had thunder thighs. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying, and she's a dancer. Oh my God, black women can, do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, my whole physicality, and we as black women, physicality was affirmed with this big-thighed, graceful, as you can imagine, beautiful woman talking about dancing out of our tradition. Oh my gosh, I was crying. And then Mary Frances came too. Oh, Lynn. Okay, I'm not going to say that. All right. My son then taught me one of the lessons that I learned out of IBW, because he was born almost in Learning House. And Learning House was a school for children, and their principle was you don't need school, you need a house where you go to learn. And they did little and big things. Little things, he was there, he was 2, and his job was to take care of the 1-year-old. And pretty soon, he got old enough and he changed the diaper of the he didn't get old enough, but he learned the skills, change the diaper of the 1-year-old. I still have a quilt that he made by the time he was 3. The children, and that's how they learned their mathematics. My son, who is now full grown, got his own babies, doing homeschool with them, he will tell you, he learned everything at Learning House. And all this other school that he did in New York was cute, but that's where he learned. He didn't learn much more after that. In some ways, I've heard that line before, but it was very affirming, and so we talk about that now. All I'm attempting to say how did I get to IBW? Why did I come? I came because I was nuts, and I was trying to get away from Berkeley and not be crazy. They were driving me physically, mentally crazy. I mean, truly. And the only defense recourse I had, they come after me, and I just reached down in the gutter, not the gutter, but down in the hood, and brought it up, and let them have it. Chum! And they were I'm pretty sure they wanted to get rid of me. I came to IBW, I did a year here, and I was writing a paper that you have to write in methods and theory at Berkeley, and the paper's called To Define Black Womanhood. Guess why I was writing it? Trying to get sane, right? But it opened up the whole arena of sociology and black folks. And although they were not enthusiastic about publishing at first, it took me beating up on heads a long time. IBW did publish that piece called To Define Black Womanhood. And so I came to get sane. And in many ways I did, because when I went back to Berkeley, I said, okay, you can keep your scholarship, I don't want it. And everybody knew I was crazy then. Sometimes I think I was crazy too. But I said, I don't want the scholarship, because if I take your scholarship, I gotta do what you tell me I gotta do. And what I want to study is the black church and women's role in the church, because that's the core and has been the core foundation of what has held black folks together in the United States. So I gave them the money back. Fortunately, Troy came along and they found some more money to take me up. And I really did finish the dissertation on women. I finished the dissertation on women in the AME church, and then I did the first book I wrote on women power in the AME church. It's called Engendering Church. That's what IBW gave me, the strength, the fortitude to still, and the sanity for focus to get doing. And that's what I brought when I finally left the seminary and went to Colorado. And you ask me now, and I would tell you, I'm an academic, and my work is intellectual. Do I make a distinction on what equals intellectual work? It just got to be good. If it isn't good, we don't want to be bothered. Do you have a degree? That's not important. Is your work good? Do you really look at the issues, the concepts, so that we can use them? It's not enough just to, as I learned when I was in the Black Panthers, it's not enough to just say, black power, black power. No, we got to have, it's a new day. So I learned a lot. It was well worth my time. And we'll get around to talking about how I've taken that into the 21st century.
I came to IBW several times. I came out of, I guess, I'll start like everybody else did with where I come from.
I was actually born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, although I did never live there. That's where my grandmother lived. My early childhood was at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, where Dr. Horace Mann Bond was president.
Preach.
And he hired my dad, who was a young PhD, well, I guess a candidate at first, and to teach sociology at Lincoln. I don't know if you all have seen or heard of this movie, The Art of the Deal.
Yeah.
About the Barnes Foundation and how it was transferred to Lincoln University and then how these people stole it back. And it's now the foundation of the Philadelphia Museum collection. You know, I mean, there's a whole Barnes Museum in Philadelphia now. But at one time, it was the property of Lincoln University during the time Dr. Bond was president. And anyway, as a result of a number of things, Dr. Bond is the father of Julian Bond.
There you go.
And
20th century.
as a result of a number of things, including the whole Barnes collection incident, Dr. Bond left Lincoln University and came to Atlanta. And probably 4 or 5 or 6 families came down to the AU Center. He became dean of the School of Education, and he kind of made a way for a number of us to come down here. And so we all lived right down the street on Market Street. The houses that are directly across from ITC, from the president's residence, we lived at 672 in the compound. And it was our little African village, and Dr. Bond was the chief. And his wife, Julia Bond, was a librarian, and she worked here. She worked originally at the Trevor Arnett Library, but she ended up her career here. So there's all these different kind of we all come back and forth in all these things. Julian, of course, was very involved with SNCC, with the formation of SNCC, and they were kind of like they're all about 10 years older than me, but they were like teenagers when I was a kid, and so I grew up around the SNCC kids, and I ended up both my parents taught at Atlanta University. My father taught sociology. My mother taught in the School of Social Work. So I'm an AU Center baby. I went to Oglethorpe Elementary School, which was segregated. I guess all the way through my elementary school was segregated. We didn't integrate the schools in Atlanta until I was in high school. And so I was of that generation that integrated the high schools here. I finished high school at the age of 16 in 1968, and decided to get as far away from the AU Center as I could, and went to college in California. Went to a mirror image of the AU Center. I went to Pomona College, which is part of the Claremont Colleges, which is just like the AU Center, but it's rich in white. And I didn't realize at the time it was that white, but I did. We had. I was at LA. My dad had a fellowship at UCLA my junior year in high school. We lived in LA, and I went to LA High for a year. And they had a group of kids that came out and recruited, and they showed all of these pictures of black kids all over the Claremont colleges.
Oh, yeah.
I did not realize it was the same 10 kids. But it was the same 10 kids in all the pictures. I got out there, I said, where's all the people there? It was very few. But that to say that I arrived in California on out of a background where I grew up in a center of black education and black culture. In a background of having my early education in segregated schools, and then participating in integrating the schools, and then went out there just as the Black Studies movement was kicking off in all of the schools. In a time when the Black Panthers and us were at war, and we in the Black Studies movement
Black Studies Centers. We were in the middle of that, of all of that.
Us,
Us, yes.
organization, us.
Or the organization Us, yeah. Ron Karenga's organization Us. And the Alliance of Black Student Unions in Southern California was kind of loosely aligned with the Panthers, but kind of in the middle between things that you know, around the, it was just after the situation at UCLA where John Huggins was killed, which was instigated by FBI, but there's a lot of culpability on both sides on that. But in any event, I came up during a very exciting time, and was one of the students. You know, we didn't lock up our trustees. They actually took us to a country club where we negotiated with them. I've never been to a country club. But in any event, we got $250,000 to do a Black Studies Center, and we started our Black Studies Center. And that was around the time that IBW was getting started back here, and had that first Black Studies Center Directors Conference, we had somebody from our group that participated in that. So I mean, there are a lot of connections, and of course, my parents being here are a lot of the people that were initially at IBW had positions in different schools. Vincent Harding was at Spelman. Started at Spelman, and Steve Henderson was at Clark, I think. Was he at Clark or Morehouse? Morehouse. Yeah, he was at Morehouse. A lot of the people that were at the Institute also had affiliations with AU Center schools. And so I would be here in the summertime, you know. And in the summer of 72 and 74, the IBW had the summer research symposiums, in which a lot of students from colleges all around the country came, and we were all, you know, in these classes where all these people came, where the C.L.R. James and St. Clair Drake and Walter Rodney and Vincent and Bobby Hill and everybody, you know, people would come for a week and be in residence and do a series of lectures, and we worked on research projects. Then, let's see, then I came back to Atlanta because they had started the graduate program in political science. Mac Jones started at Atlanta University. And that was, there were two, Ford Foundation funded the creation of two Black political science PhD programs, one at AU and one at Howard. And we were trying to create a different kind of political science and to approach political science from a different perspective, to have intellectuals also in the service of community. So there were a lot of relationships between the political science department at AU and IBW. And the School of Social Work, which was redefining, was redefining social work and creating and looking at the creation of a Black or Afrocentric School of Social Work, which Lloyd was very, very involved with. Ginger Hill was the dean. My mother was on the faculty there, and it was a so that there were a lot of young intellectuals, but also people in service of community who were floating back and forth between the AU Center and IBW. IBW was actually on the corner here at Beckwith and Chestnut. There was two little houses right there.
Beckwith and Brawley.
Yeah,
Brawley now.
what's Brawley? Yeah. Chestnut is Chestnut is Brawley, James B. Brawley, which is named after the former president of Clark. But it was, when we were there, it was Chestnut. It was 87 Chestnut Street.
87.
And it was kind of rambling. It was a big house. It was a big rambling house. It wasn't a mansion or anything like that. Little tiny rooms.
Hardly.
You know, we had to study. You had offices up in you know, upstairs in former closets, I guess, I don't know. But it was just a very exciting intellectual atmosphere to be in. It also, I guess the other thing we probably should have said at the beginning when IBW was founded was that, as Jesse mentioned, it was founded as part of the King Center. And there was I guess a key split over the issue of nonviolence as a philosophy or a tactic, and just a difference in perspective on things. So that was very controversial at the time that IBW split off. That's, you know, a lot of these things you can talk about, it seems like it happened organically now, but I mean, at the time, it was a lot of conflict going on. Money was, you know, I mean, corporate sponsorship and money was a big part of the
Buildings
of
as
that.
opposed to ideas.
Yeah, but IBW actually started at ITC, which was right across from my house, and then came into these buildings over here, and then C.T. Vivian had a project which was in the second house.
Up the hill,
Yeah. He
not
up
the
there.
two next door.
Not the two, well, yeah, okay, yeah. He at one point, he was in the house next door at, you know, he came
Anti-Klan
back.
project?
Well, the anti-Klan project was
No, that
was
comes
later. That was later, yeah, the anti-Klan project was
See,
later.
all these things, the anti-Klan project, you thought they just got started with the Southern poverty, right?
Yeah, but in that one, that was one really, you know, in which white people infiltrated the Klan, you know, to produce information
Serious
about
information.
right-wing movements around the South. And
And it spread to the rest of the country, because I went to a meeting in Portland.
So, as a graduate, so my initial involvement with IBW was as a graduate student in the summer research symposiums, and then also because while I was working on my PhD in political science, I worked for Wallene as a very lowly paid, I think, but it was good. It was good. Lowly paid. It was very good for that time. I want to say that for that time.
And you got publications.
It was a good salary, and I got publications. I had enough money to bail people out of jail. I can say that. So I mean, it was which we had to do, you know. And I had a job, so that was one of the requirements for the bail bondsman, that somebody with a job had to sign on it. I didn't have any property or anything. They said, well, you have a check coming in every 2 weeks. Well, once a month. They got paid once a month. Yeah. And we got to present at conferences and all.
Yeah, you did.
We had
That's Vita Village.
we had 4 or 5. Ojita Penn, who taught for many years over at Atlanta Metropolitan College, and was one of the research assistants, and Leslie Hill. So we had a great group actually, and had a lot of fun doing the project and doing research around the whole state of Georgia. Actually, we traveled and did research all around.
And Susan
the state.
carried her gun every time we did. Yeah, you did.
Well, it was, you know,
It was necessary. We're driving through
We were driving
Waycross,
through
Georgia.
rural Georgia, yeah. And you know, we got a chance to look at the impact of, the project was titled Black Stylization and Implications for Child Welfare, but it gave us a chance to look at child welfare programs around the state, you know, how the state of Georgia was treating youth at risk during that. They didn't call them youth at risk at that time, but we got to look at a lot of different kinds of things, from the impact of black women in, what's that little town that ran the ones that ran the Head Start Center. You know, that for many black women in the South, the Head Start program was one of the first things that gave them economic independence from being domestic workers. I mean, from not, I mean, if you weren't in the class that were teachers and all, one of the first, and that enabled people to engage in community organizing and community struggle, because you had an independent economic base from working for white folks. You know.
It was either white or Athens, but I think it was white Georgia.
Yeah. And it might have been around, was it around Monticello, or it was down, it's heading down towards Albany. I don't know exactly where it was. And then we got to look at things all around the whole state. And you could see how you know, programs, federal programs like Head Start enable people to develop an independent sense of consciousness. It also happened with some of the programs in Mississippi and the Freedom Co-ops and things like that got some funding during that time. In any event, I went back to California and went to Stanford, where I studied with St. Clair Drake, but still would come back to Atlanta during the summers. And then, at one point, my mother got sick with cancer, and I came back here and I realized I probably was not going back. It was a time when I had been offered a job at Howard University in the Black Studies program at Howard, and one of my coworkers, other college students, Al Colon, who was finishing his PhD in education, he had been offered a position with there was a new program at IBW called the Black Studies Curriculum Development Project to look at Black Studies in around the country, which had then been 10 years old, and to look after a decade where was Black Studies. And that was a project that I have documented in these photographs of Black scholars that came together, essentially for hardly any money. We had some money from Ford, but we had enough money to bring people together, I think 3 or 4 times, and produce, figure out the best curriculum in each subject, and then we published that. I traded jobs with Al. He went to the job at Howard, and I came here, and then and worked with Doug Davidson on the Black Studies project, and that's in the IBW in the later period, in the 70s, early 80s, yeah. So, although if you look at the life of IBW, its existence was from 69 to 84. It's a relatively short period of time. The number of scholar, activist, intellectuals that came through was enormous, and the outreach. We published a quarterly Black. What was it called? Black. It was a quarterly Black report. It was It had a name. I can't think of it. It was a newsletter. We had newsletters that we started doing on mimeograph, and then we got a printing press. We actually operated the printing press ourselves, and and so we published. We had a publication that we sent out, probably to, at one point to several thousand people all around the country, and anybody who was doing anything in Black Studies had something in one of those issues. And then there were the occasional papers that were published, like to define Black womanhood. Walter Rodney had one. St. Clair Drake did one. Lerone Bennett did one. Joyce Ladner did one. And so we had that. We had a bookstore right here in the community. We had a bookstore which was actually a community center in many ways, and we did a lot of cultural activities in addition to that. We had the first Black Film Festival here out of IBW that was in the city of Atlanta. We had poetry readings. We had
Marxist studies.
The good thing about IBW, coming out of California where everything was divided into, you were so in polar opposition between, the Panthers on the one side and as the revolutionary nationalists and the cultural nationalists with Ron Karenga on the other side. At IBW, you were able to explore the intersection of race and class, and to look and culture, and not you were not a you were not an either or. At IBW, it gave you the intellectual freedom to explore the real situation here, to really look at the situation of Black people in the United States and our position with other African peoples around the world. In the latter stages, we did the Black Studies project. We also ran the printing press and printed the documents. Third World Press printed some of them for us. We had a relationship with Don Lee, Hakeem Mahmoudi, and he published about 4 of the titles under Third World Books. We had a relationship with bookstores around the world, independent black bookstores around the world, with Bogle Louverture Press in England. They had a black and radical book fair in England, and we would go and take our publications there and bring their publications back here. They published Walter's book and many others, so we had a lot.
We edited a special issue of Harvard Education Review.
Right, yep. Special issue of Harvard Education Review. We worked on Vincent's book, which was originally going to be a trilogy, There Is a River, which was, you know, the study of black struggle and resistance, and we were trying to work it into a television series also. We were a little
Called
ahead
The
of-
Other American Revolution.
Right. And so we got, and that actually was published as a separate book, The Other American Revolution.
was.
It didn't ever become a TV series, but it was.
And it
was,
didn't get the same thing as There's a River.
yeah, yeah. Oh, we gotta leave time for questions. All right. Okay. So, other things that happened. Some of the people that were involved with IBW were also involved with Venice Ramos Brigade in Cuba, and bringing Atlanta people to Cuba for Venice Ramos. Around that time is when the FBI stuff got very, very intense. There was a lot of, I mean, I don't know that you would think that just the ringing of a phone would be so terrifying, but the fact that there was a tactic of calling your house and hanging up, and calling your house and hanging up, and calling your house and hanging up, that would go on like all night. There were some terroristic things done to some people's cars. The IBW was broken into several times. Computers were taken. Other things that were basic to research, but it was just a very disruptive period. People would change their phone numbers mysteriously. These people would get the phone numbers the next day. So clearly, there was some collusion between the government and the phone company and what was happening. No one was killed, but you know, it was close in a couple of cases.
Mental health was challenged.
Mental health was definitely challenged.
Badly.
And that was one of the things that also funding dried up, and people had to, most of the IBW scholars had to scatter to different places around the country where they could be based at different educational institutions. Let's see.
Let it go, let the questions.
We'll let the questions happen now. Yeah. So it was, you know, we've been through some very good times and some very bad times. But overall, it was a tremendous growth experience, I think, for everybody that came in contact with IBW.
And we found out we are the ones that we have been waiting for. June Jordan said that in 1978 when she was talking about the women in South Africa. And that has been a philosophy of mine that I learned at IBW that I pass on to you, that we are the ones that we have been waiting for.
Not them coming down the road, but you.
Us.
Do you want to add anything about Pat Daly?
I don't know if we have much time to say Pat Daly was one of our very involved workers at IBW. And in fact, Pat Daly learned to run, she told me to mention a 400-something IB-Dick printer when we got past the little AB-Dick printer. And by Pearl Clee's sister, Kristen, and Pat standing reading the book, one at the printer and one reading the book, to learn how to run printers and all that kind of thing. But Pat was the person who at the end was the acting director of IBW to help close it down. And she's very proud to say that we closed with everything in order. We had all of our books in order, we paid our debts, and we didn't leave anything for the IRS to come in and deal with. And we also had a little pension to give to Ruth Harmon, who had been one of our critical workers, and everybody was underpaid or didn't make any money. but she told me to mention especially that IBW was closed in good stead, and a number of our research materials are at Schaumburg, some are at Emory, and who knows, some are still in Pat's attic. I don't want to tell the archivist that, but some are in Pat's attic. But I just mentioned to Pat Daly and the critical work she did, and she told me to mention also Jan Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
And Jan Douglas was very much involved in supporting Maynard Jackson. And Maynard, we knew Maynard Jackson, and Jan did fundraising for Maynard when he was running for vice mayor, the first black mayor of Atlanta. So IBW was very involved in a variety of things in Maynard's support and campaign, and we wrote the preamble for the Black Power Conference out at Gary. And so there's so much that could be done, and there's so much research, and there's so much to be told, but we did our work, so we're leaving it to you guys.
Yeah. Pick up the baton. We got some long distance movement to do here. We're not through yet, but y'all got to take out, we can't sprint with you. It's out now.
Well, thank you for these presentations and for the inspiration and for the memory. And let's open it up for Q&A. Comments and thoughts, please go ahead.
First, I want to thank you all for being here. It's really awesome. This panel and this class in general has been really good for me for like healing about all the stuff that I've gone through that's wrong with the American left. And
One perspective on that?
and it's been, and to be able to see people who have theory and practice like all together is really refreshing, and be able to have like now like the right role models. And so first, like, thank you all for being here, and thank you for this class in general. My question, I guess, is for each of you, if there's one piece of advice or stuff that you've learned over the years through struggle that you'd share with us.
I'll say, one of the things I learned, and I see it now as an elder looking back, and I might not have known it as well when I was younger, and that's part of why I have memory loss and other things dealing with stress, is that to survive, I think, this is my opinion, you have to have a spiritual base and you have to have community. If you don't have a spiritual base, and it doesn't have to be, it's not have church, I'm not saying that. It may be that you're walking in the woods or something, some way you're connecting to nature. But you have to have some kind of spiritual base, and you have to have community in order to survive.
I think you have to be responsible for your own education. You know, the schools are designed to
Give you school aid.
yeah, to bring you up in a certain way. And you have to think outside the box, and you have to go look up and find these scholars and sit at their feet. You know, I mean, that was the advantage to me of IBW, is that people came and we got to sit at their feet for a week at a time, and to learn about them and their struggles, and then also to work with them on research projects, you know. So, and all of this is to say none of us got paid very much at all, or if at all, from IBW. We usually had jobs, everybody had jobs outside that supplemented what you got at IBW. When we were students, we didn't get, did we get a little stipend? I don't remember whether we got a little stipend or not. We didn't get hardly anything as students. But we got tremendous experience.
Yes.
And to open your mind to look at the struggles of peoples around the world and take what's applicable to your situation. Realize that you can learn from other people's experiences. All of us, when we were young, thought that we had invented the world, and we were the first people to realize that change had to happen. And then you find out it's been going on for 100 years or 200 years, you know.
More than that.
And you have to, and in working with movements and building your movements, you have to do that. have spent most of my career also in the public sector. I came in under Maynard and Andy Young and have worked for the city for 30 years. Most of y'all probably just know me as a photographer, but I actually have real jobs at the city. But I've always used what I do at the city as a base for also doing work in the community for, and sometimes it's political and sometimes it's cultural work, but it's all, it's your job is something you do to maintain your life, but what you do for yourself and your community is really your purpose, your life's work. And the other money, it'll come in some way or the other. So that's
I would contribute what I got from IBW literally was community. Not because they were all around me telling me what community was. At this moment in history, I have a research team at Michigan State. But I have to preface by saying I was at Colorado, and then Michigan State recruited me from Colorado. Now that's important because how often does any campus recruit a faculty person, and particularly a black woman, right? But they recruited me, which meant, okay, I had started the team, the research team there, and the reason I started the research team was because I was in Boulder, Colorado, where 95% of the population is white and very rich. And the only people who weren't rich were the Chicanos and Mexicans who cleaned the house, me. And there were a few native folk. But even the native folk did, Ward was there, but he didn't live in Boulder. So the point I'm making is I had nobody there to identify with, to call over and say, girl, would you come do my hair or something? Or let's have some chicken. Nobody. The point is I had no collectivity. And I had come out of situations from my family to IBW where collectivity was important. I didn't know it, but I had learned the significance of community. And there wasn't one. I had to do it. And so I literally started say, y'all want to come by my house? If you look brown, come on down. That was all right. And then there were some white people who didn't look brown, but you willing to engage where we are? Come on down. That was the beginning of the African Atlantic Research Team. So by the time I took a sabbatical and went to MSU, and Ward was chair of ethnic studies where I was, MSU said, we want you to stay. And I said, oh no, because I promised Ward I was coming back. So I had to check back with them. Now I had community in Boulder. And I said, okay, Ward, this is what they're offering me, blah, 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 blah. He said, take it. He said, but wait a minute. Put it off for a little while so we may be able to parlay this for the department. We did that. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is I have now, from that 1996 beginning of the research team, I still have that research team, and there are many folk, and I didn't bring them with me, but I'm going to give them to Jesse. We have a newsletter, and we did a little bitty poetry book stuff from our team, and so I'm gonna give all those to him so you can take a look and see what we do. But I have also learned that just because you invite everybody to come in, don't mean that that's gonna be it. That is not necessary. You have got to have some reasons why you invite whomever you invite. And whether you like it or not, you have to discriminate. Everybody ain't ready to be the kind of collective sharing, collective responsibility I had learned at IBW. Collective responsibility means we're gonna have a meeting and you bring your lunch. Well, you gotta bring a cookie for everybody. Either that or cut all the cookies up so everybody gets a piece. Because you are collectively responsible for it. We have another meeting and you're gonna bring a sandwich, either bring enough for everybody or cut it up. And we have put people out because they would bring their sandwich, their cookie, and eat it. And we said, oh no, that can't fly. You can't do that. Now, as the faculty member who had a salary, that sense of community meant I would cook the pot of beans and rice that would be the core for everybody. But that meant I'm stressing me out, not stressing, but stretching, right? make the pot of beans and rice or the beans or whatever. And we invited, as I said before, people like Muriel Williams, who was Robert Williams' wife, and before she died, she came and told us all the stories that he told her. And who's the husband of Midlow Hall?
Oh, Harry Haywood.
Harry Hayward. You probably never heard of Harry Hayward, but Harry Hayward was one of the black folks who went to Russia okay. His wife came and she talked about Harry. Well, fortunately, I had met Harry when I had been at IBW. And I had gone to some of the apartments and I'm sitting there looking at him. Talk about sitting at feet. Initially, I used to say, I don't have to come and sit at Mrs. Du Bois' feet. She ain't never done nothing for me. I learned real fast. So when people started coming, I was the first one on the floor to sit at the feet and listen very deeply. And that meant sitting at Vincent's feet, anybody's feet. But what I'm trying to get to is it was learning that community doesn't mean everybody's in the same geographical location. Community can have spaces. These two women are my community because I don't talk with them every year. This year we've been doing pretty good though, haven't we? But I don't see them. But I can say, oh no. AJ can say, when Vincent died, I said, okay, I'm coming. And AJ said, well, I need something to wear for the da-da-da-da-da. I said, got it. So I brought a couple of dresses. That's community.
And she gave it to me. She didn't just let me wear it.
But that's community. And that's what I hope, instilled in the students who've come through. At this point, I think we've produced about 16 PhDs whose academic training, because I'm an academic, they are intellectuals, because I'm an intellectual, but their training via community is bigger than anything the university thought they were going to get. And they're in a lot of different places in the country. And Ward came and he said, what about that one that was with you all the time? What's that one? I'm like, I said, a male? No, it was a girl. Real fair-skinned, cute, da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, Sonia. He remembers, because we were instilling in Boulder as well as in Michigan State this idea of community and collective responsibility that I learned at IBW. And you haven't, but Al Josie, HA, has been to Michigan, and she can tell you about our research team. So her first question was, okay, tell me how the team, who the what, who fell out, what the a sense of community. That was the biggest thing that I learned, and how to translate that external to that little enclave in Atlanta called IBW. How do you do it in Boulder where there ain't nobody black there? And then how you do it in Michigan where there are lots of black people, but they're not interested in this stuff, right? Which means you have to do a different kind of recruiting with those students, because they come to get their certificate so they can get their bachelor's degree and get out and get that job. Because when they get that job, they're gonna make some money. So you'd find a new tactic to start creating community. So you're in class and you hear them, and they say they're gonna major in communication arts, or they're gonna which means they wanna be on TV, right? Or they're gonna major in math business or something. And I'm saying, so what you gonna do? This is class. And they tell me. I said, well, basically, I don't care what your major is, political science, communication, arts, business, doesn't matter. If you get a bachelor's degree, you can't get no good job. You're gonna be a gopher for somebody, and you might make $25,000, $30,000. What? I said, and of course, they wanna get nasty at me. But by the time the semester is over, I have woven them into community. They don't all stay, but they do remember. And many of them come back to say, I want you to know that C that you gave me when I was in class, the best C I ever got. I said, I didn't give you doodly squat. You earned it. They called me the other day and asked me if this young man could earn better than an F. I said, nope, nothing he can do makes him earn more than an F, because he'd already earned that F. But the point is, don't back up. You're not being community support by doing a favor for them. Okay, I'm gonna give you a B. No, take the F. You gotta stay another year, that's your problem. I ain't got no money. Well, when you make up your mind to start really working, I'll help you find the money to come for the next part of this year. The point is, it's community, and it is reaching out, and you don't have to be black to be a part of what I'm talking about, but you gotta have the headset. You've got to be willing to work and work hard, be responsible in a collective fashion, and then do that which is coming next for you, and integrating it with the rest of us. I learned that at IBW.
Sounds like it's almost like a cure for, like a prevention for being burnout.
Oh, no,
Like
there's no
you did it.
burnout. You don't burn out.
Like
Burnout
you-
is not, no, it's not, burnout is not allowed. Because one of the first, no, we burned out at the end.
Are there any
No, I
more
don't think
questions?
so. I don't think so.
Yeah, other questions?
So I wanted to hear about, you had so many speakers, so many people coming in and out. We talked a little bit in the beginning about that the AU center, like the actual schools might have been separate to a degree. But I'm interested, were the students invited? Did students know about the you know, the people coming? Were they welcome? And community in Atlanta? I mean, because obviously you had a core group of folks.
Yes.
But I mean, you know, were people kind of outside of that group able to come in?
Tell the story of Miss Nance.
Well, I'll say just one thing before you tell the story about Miss Mance. Students were very much a part of everything that we did, especially students in political science, Mac Jones students and other students. They would go to their classes and then they would come to IBW. There's a story from some students who came down from, I don't know if it was Dartmouth or one of the schools. We had a
was
program
Dartmouth.
where we made an arrangement. They were trying to take our black faculty, our black professors, and send them to white institutions. And Vincent wrote an article about this, and he was saying, well, since we have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of black students down here, and on your campus you might have 30 or 40, why don't you just send your students down to us and send their tuition with them? And so that happened. Some of the students came and brought their tuition, and they came to IBW. And one student especially said, she said, I've been to the best schools in this country, in quotes, and I had to come down to this raggedy little house to really get an education. And so, yes, we had students coming from other places, we had students in the center, we had community people, because there was not this thing about because you lived in the community, you couldn't come over to IBW, it was just for the scholars. And it was very open to people.
Oh, and I'm from East Lansing.
Are you? Where?
Out there.
I had two questions. One was, has anyone done some research, like requested through the Freedom of Information to find out about the FBI, where are those?
Didn't Derek do that?
Derek got some.
But I don't like his book. I will tell you that point blank.
Let's talk about it openly.
And Jerry,
Yeah,
yeah, in terms of that also, Bobby Hill did. And he
Okay.
requested information, and I've been planning to get some too about Vincent, but Bobby got a lot of information through the Freedom of Information Act.
And is it somewhere where other people can access, or they just got their own?
There is still so much work that we need to do, and we need to talk to you and some other people about it in terms of work about IBW and how we need to continue documenting what IBW was about, because Derek's book is just a tiny part, and Derek, I won't say anything of it.
There you go.
I mean, I'm actually curious about it in the sense that, I mean, we've looked for, when we brought in yourselves and a number of speakers, Strickland and others, to talk about the IBW, but it's one of the only books available. So
It is
we looked at
Exactly.
it.
the only book. None of us-
Exactly.
none of
We
us have
haven't
written-
done the
none of
work,
us have written
and it's
it.
our
That's
fault.
true.
We
Yeah,
haven't
I'm
really
not
done
criticizing,
the
what I'm
work
saying
that
is,
needs to be done.
But what I'm saying, because it's the only one, and it's
have
relatively
to
recent,
use
and
it,
it filled
yeah.
the gap.
Yes.
And I think you all are, I mean, we're already in dialogue about publishing something around this to add voices, and so I think it's important. But understanding the critique of the book or the limitations, I think is significant, because
is
most people in this room have read some or all of the book and need to understand the critiques. I mean, that's something that comes up that I'd like to ask. I had a separate question, which is following up on the previous two questions, is if you could just expand a little bit more on the cultural scene. So like, were people coming to the IBW, was it all like business and scholarship? Were people coming to party and hang out and eat? What music were you all listening to? Were the coolest kids on campus like, let's go hang out at the IBW? Or were you all the nerds, or were the political people?
We weren't nerds,
Help us
but other
understand. Help us understand that cultural vibe. I'm really curious, because for a lot of radicals, some of us have to actually be told or remind ourselves to actually chill out sometimes and party. Other times we have to stop partying and get to work. So I'm just curious, like, what was the vibe like?
We party every weekend.
Who was
I'll
telling the
take-
story? Taking the children to Learning House and meeting up
Oh,
at the.
yeah, Ashley. And you remember I said I was the individual that came into IBW and had to learn to be collective and communal. So I had the individualistic chip on my shoulder, right? And understand, I probably have that for myself anyway. But I went to Berkeley. And the one thing that Berkeley reminds you of, and I'm sure you got it at Stanford, one thing that Berkeley reminds you of as a graduate student is, we selected you from the top 10% in the nation. You got it? In other words, not the 10% we brought in, We went into the top 10% and chose you. And you just get that all the time. So my arrogance was out of that as well. Plus my granddad always told me I was great, so I just knew I was. But at the same time, as that individual, that kind of individualism, it was still riding with me. And it didn't really leave until I left IBW and began to step back from myself and realize I'm an individual, that's true, but it's community. The story I was telling was because that individual self, I would always be in tension, I won't say conflict, tension with many of the others, including Vincent, because I couldn't understand what was so great and wonderful about him. You know, so what?
You really don't know.
I said, no, I know now. I know now. Maybe I don't know that, but I know. I wasn't a wife. But as a consequence of being in tension, they had these meetings, and these meetings would go on forever. And I had this baby child that had to get picked up from wherever, had to eat, blah, 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 blah. And so we would be sitting around the table, talk about struggle, and remember Jill? No, did you know Jill Hagler? Came with Andy.
Oh, yeah, I do.
And she was the other person from Berkeley. So Jill and I we would be there, and they talk about struggle, and I'm saying, I'm so sick of hearing struggle, I don't know what to do. What's this struggle shit? Nobody struggle. So one particular evening, we're sitting around and they're talking, and Muddy Waters was playing at the Birdcage. Now, the Birdcage used to be
Right up Fair Street. It's right up Fair Street. Atlanta
nightclub.
Atlanta Student Movement Boulevard, you know, but I mean, it was
Right there, and
just
they
that
would bring
come up from
in
the bottom.
entertainers,
Yeah.
and Muddy Waters was gonna be there. So we're sitting there, and I have gotten my baby, and she's wherever, and so I'm saying to my ex-husband, I got to go. Because, you know, and then you couldn't just say that. You had to make a statement to the collective because we were a group. And I said, I'm going to go hear Muddy Waters, at which point in time you asked for culture. Bill Strickland said, that's the problem with niggas. They always got to go out and listen to that music and all that body, right? And I said, whatever you said, that's fine, but I'm getting ready to go see Muddy Waters. I cut out, I go to the Birdcage, I'm sitting there listening to Muddy Waters, and he was so good. Oh my God, he was so good. Next thing I know, I look up, and here comes Bill Strickland.
Everybody else.
And everybody that was sitting around the table on struggle. And I said, oh, is this where the struggle is tonight? That kind of stuff. And there were students who would come in as well. That's one story in terms of the cultural part. Culture. And then the other one was, again at the Birdcage, his name wasn't Farrell. Was it Farrell Thomas?
Who?
Thomas.
Are you talking about her husband?
No, not Farrell, but the musician, Thomas. Singer.
Rufus Thomas?
No. He used to sing like a yodeling. You just-
Leon Thomas.
Leon.
Leon Thomas. If you don't know Pharoah Sanders' Karma, well, if you don't know Pharoah Sanders' Karma, y'all need to go get
Yeah,
that.
you do. It's very good.
Download it from iTunes. That is a seminal jazz piece.
Yeah,
You know, it's
yeah.
got anyway.
So he was playing at the Birdcage. Now, obviously, I was one who paid attention to what was going on at the Birdcage all the time. And remember I told you I lived public housing, so I'm a hood person? Okay. So he was playing, and we went, and I say we, the Learning House brought all of the children. So these are 2 years, and I guess Aisha, how was
The
it?
youngest were 3. I don't think we had any 2.5 was the youngest.
Who was that? Because Lunta was there. Okay, and I thought Ayanna was not younger than Luton.
As
It
far as
does-
I know, the children were at least 2.5.
Okay, it doesn't matter, you get the picture.
Kids.
Okay, we get to the bird cage, and the leader, the teacher, she brings in the children and sits them down, right? And the owner of the place comes up and says, we can't have the children in here. This isn't gonna work. You cannot have the children. And Leon Thomas said, what? What we gonna be doing that the children ought not to see? Right? And the guy says, well, the law says, hey, if the children can't be here, I'm leaving. Now, Leon Thomas was not a member of IBW. Leon Thomas didn't live in Atlanta. He was a musician, a very talented musician, but his principal position, his value position, was in support of the fact that this is a cultural experience that they will have an opportunity to see. And if the legal says you can't, then close down the bar, because the children are here. That was some stuff. I don't know, maybe you got some.
There was very much fun and games and play and coming to people's houses to eat, and I was cooking for a whole lot of people. Another thing I wanted to say is that I did never experience any kind of sexism at IBW. I felt that I could say what I needed to say and be myself, and especially I remember Ojita Penn when I was about 7 months pregnant telling me how beautiful I was and all that kind of stuff. So there were a whole lot of things going on, a lot of cultural things, a lot of partying. Vincent reminded me of his coming to my house that I can't remember because of brain problems. But we were social. We were very social. We talked and we partied. And you all don't have a bird cage in your community. That's a loss. This was a first class nightclub that was just up the street that you could walk to, that brought in all kinds of people, and was, I mean, first class. It was not a hole in the wall. And it was a wonderful place, and you could come and be there and continue the conversations and continue the dancing and the whatever it is that you were doing.
But we also
We had a lot of
some
meals at-
fourth-class places like the Bottom and
We
the Fish
also
Fry.
went down to the
Yeah.
bottom, the Fair Street.
That we
Bottom.
all hung out
We
in.
hung out at the fish, yeah, you know, we're at the Bucket of Blood, and, you know, Pascal's was on Hunter Street, which is now Martin Luther King, which is, you know, a travesty right now where it is, but that's where, you know, everybody gathered there for breakfast or at the carousel in the evening. And, but most of the time, we had house parties, because we didn't
That's
have
right.
a whole lot of
Yes,
money. We
right.
had house parties every weekend. It was a party at somebody's house.
But here, well, it's
And-
party, not like you thinking party, let's get together, have music, drinks, and have a party. It was dinner,
It was dinner, yeah.
potluck dinner, because you couldn't afford to feed your own self. So, you know, you bring what you can feed, and then we had a party, and we ate. Everybody ate, because everybody ate.
Yeah,
So you sounded like you had some sexism.
Oh, I would disagree with her on the sexism.
I said,
She said it for herself. She said she
and
didn't
my friend
experience. I disagree.
Faye
I
Bellamy,
did.
before she died, she said she did not experience it because Faye was former Air Force,
Yeah.
and Faye was known for knocking down a state trooper downtown. She didn't have any problems.
They didn't have any problems either, because you're right. Because once a burglar broke into her house to rob her house, and Faye was about, what, 6 feet? 5'9"? Beautiful. Anyway, and so Faye pulled out the gun. She said, okay, you got two choices. You can go down right now, or you can get the hell out of my house. Now, what you say? You think you're gonna go up against her because she's a woman? But I definitely experienced sexism at IBW. I absolutely did. I would be a lie if I tried to say it didn't hurt. That's what I don't like about Derek's book, because he missed the nuances of it
Well, he
completely.
didn't talk to you.
He did talk to me, but he didn't listen.
Okay.
But
Well, so a lot of it had to do with the leadership. The leadership for a long time, you know, the leadership part was predominantly male. There was a community
Yes.
of scholars, but I mean, you know, Vincent, Bill, and Bobby were, and this is for the second part of IBW. Even after they left and they were all somewhere else, they made all the major decisions.
And I would
They
say,
tried.
not for a while, Susan,
Well-
was predominantly, the leadership was male.
The leadership was male.
Period,
Yeah.
across the
Yeah.
board.
Well, I certainly don't want to say there wasn't sexism. I was thinking, I said there was not sexual
That's what you
harassment.
said.
No, I wasn't
No,
saying there was
no,
sexual
Because
harassment.
definitely,
I didn't say that,
it was
no.
the pushback
Nobody
against
harassed.
not
No.
myself thinking, no, I definitely wasn't harassed.
Wasn't that,
But
no.
it was that period of time. And yes, there was this whole thing about males who thought they were in charge. But I think myself, in terms of growing and finding out whether or not, it helped me in certain ways now looking back to find myself and to come to grips with who I am and what I accept. And do I think I'm enough? And am I willing to put out there? Sometimes, I'm speaking for myself, sometimes it's easier to critique something than it is to step forward and put something out there. And I know that at an earlier age, I was very insecure about stepping forward and putting ideas out there. I was very much better at supporting other ideas that people put out there. So that I am definitely saying that I learned from IBW and continuing into now being an elder, how to accept some responsibility, and I think that's why we're talking to you about this journal. It's time for us to come out and accept even more responsibility, because if we want the true story to be out there, we have to do the work to put it out there.
And my contribution would be, the sexism was there, and I called it individualism, but my contestation oftentimes was a sexual contestation, completely. They would say, well, at one point, Strickland, I said, I gotta go home and take care of my baby. He said, well, the struggle, and I said, hey, if you ain't got no babies, you ain't got no damn struggles. Now, that's because I'm geech. We don't play. And I sometimes wonder about that, because I never taught my daughter that, but then she tells the story how she used to sleep with a butcher knife. I said, okay, I know where you got that from. But she's right. It was there. But you didn't, no, it was there. That she didn't feel it, it's her. I not only felt it, I can give you incidences. I gave you black psychology, I gave you publishing Black women, Divine Black Womanhood, and there are all kinds of other little instances. It was there, and Derek didn't get it. And what he wanted to claim, he claimed, not Miriam, Mamie. Mamie said there was no such thing, and he took that, and when I said there was, he wouldn't include it in the volume. That critique is big for me.
There's a lot that is not there in that book. And again, I say, because there are a lot of us who have not told the story, and some of that is our responsibility to step forward and tell the story.
But only some of it. I don't claim that it's all our responsibility, AJ. It's all of the three of us because of where we sit in the world. But there are people not like me. What, Louise, for example? Louise got a story and a half.
I don't mean just us. I mean
But
all
I would
the
not
women.
I would not say all of those women of IBW have the responsibility to step forward, because you can't just step forward if there's no pathway or no venue. Now, if this is a venue and a pathway, so be it, and we can bring them in, and I accept that responsibility. But I'm not prepared to say it's our fault, we got to do something about it, because because you want to do something about it don't mean they're gonna get done. You got to have a pathway, a mechanism, and a venue for getting it done. I have tried to do it via the research team in Michigan State. That didn't work. I made a recommendation for this kind of a panel at a professional meeting of millennials, and the millennials said, no, we don't want that. And when I said to someone, find out why they didn't want, because they didn't understand what we were talking about. They never heard of IBW. The one they heard of was another one.
We also need to say that IBW that we know that started in Atlanta is
It's
not the same as IBW 21st Century
No.
that is going on now.
No.
Totally different organizations.
Totally.
We did not copyright that IBW, and another organization came and took that. But if you really want to know about our IBW, it's IBW in Atlanta from 69 to 84.
And the basic things are, the basic research materials are all up at the Schomburg, because Howard was chief of the Schomburg at the time, and he rented a truck and drove it all up there. But in all of our in all of our houses, there are a lot of things, and we probably should have some IBW stuff down here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I have asked,
I know, it's
I
at the
have asked,
And there's
I-
stuff too at Emory.
and, yeah, I know there's stuff at Emory, and I think we should, also, we also documented the 30th anniversary conference we had.
The 40th.
40th
2009.
40th anniversary conference, and I'm not old enough to have, anyway, I guess it's
Sure.
50th now. But anyway, so there was a series of videotapes done, which are somewhere at the Schomburg, and we're trying to get a set that can be in Atlanta.
Yes.
Because everybody that was at that conference was interviewed for.
There were videos and also oral interviews,
Yeah.
and the conference itself was video.
Right.
And see, one of the things
And
on
those
that
tapes really have
conference-
not
And I was the
looked at.
coordinator of the
Yeah,
conference.
Yeah.
One of the things about that conference that you don't hear us talk about for IBW is Grace and James and Grace Boggs.
Right. Yeah.
Grace was there.
Grace was
Yes.
there.
And James was in the middle of IBW,
Yeah,
both physically as well as intellectually.
yeah.
And my sister, who was not at IBW, read James Boggs. She said, all right, that's what I got. And she then took on a whole different persona from the James Boggs. So James Boggs is critical.
Yeah.
I have one tiny story I want to tell you about my daughter because it's a good little story and it feeds on Sue's story about Cuba. She talked about the FBI and breaking into IBW and telephones ringing at night and then just hanging up. And you forgot that they threw bricks and painted the door of Donahue's house, painted it red, right, for communists, and threw bricks in his house. This is a guy who had 2 little babies. I think he had 2 by then. So he was also organizing Venceremos. Do you know Venceremos? These are used to be the groups of people, young people from the United States and other places, Germany, places, and they would go to Cuba and they would work in the sugarcane fields to help cut the cane so that they would have a good, what they call safra, which is the cutting of the cane. So Donahue organized the brigades for the young people, and my daughter was 14, and she wanted to go. And so I said, that's fine. Donahue was really doing it, and he was putting it together. And that was going to be fine. My daughter was going to go, and they were going. And then they started throwing bricks at Donahue's house and putting red. The telephones at my house started ringing. And they took our dog and put him around a tree. He didn't die, but they wrapped him around the tree. And so I'm saying, daughter, child, I don't know. You're all I got. And we've been together a long time together. I don't know if I can let you go there with these kind of risks involved. 14. So we had a family meeting, because that's something else we started at IBW. We have, and we still do it, family meetings to make decisions. So she said, then I call for a family meeting. So we sat down at the meeting and she said, and I told her what I thought. Howard told her what he thought, and she said, okay, that's all well and good, and I understand that, Mama. But ever since I was the little bittiest thing of all, you have said, if you believe in something, you have to stand up for it and be prepared to sacrifice to the end. I stand prepared to sacrifice by way of what Cuba is attempting to do, particularly when it comes to African descendant people, black people, she said. She says, you cannot keep me from going now after you have taught me for these 14 years. By this time, I was a piece of clay. I'm saying, and so she went, and we took her to the airport, and I was scared shitless. Got on the plane, and we got a note back saying they arrived safely. Well, from that point, I went out and had a party, because I knew in Cuba she was going to be fine.
Yeah.
She coming back, I got scared again, and sure enough, they didn't bother her. Everything was fine. But the message she gave to me about that, plus another one she gave, was saying, good lands, the motion, what kind of child did I bring into the world? I don't remember saying this, but it wasn't me by myself. It was this community of folk in Atlanta, from Miss Mance to Edith and to Susan and her brother to AJ and her kids. At the time, it was 1 kid, maybe 2 kids. Two kids. Yeah, because Luther comes after that, right? Okay. But the point is, this was a collective of people who didn't live even within close proximity of each other. To get to each other, we had to take a car or bus. But it was all of them raising this kid. And when Hillary said it takes a village to raise a child, I want to throw a brick in her face, because that's where it comes from. It comes out of this African sense of collective everything. But you don't got to be African to know collective. We in the U.S. have constructed another set of collective, and IBW taught me back how to do that. And so she became the example of what did you learn from IBW? Because that's what she learned. Because she'd been at IBW since she was 7 years old. She went to Oglethorpe too. It was integrated by that time. But I had to say that because Elise was very.
No, I appreciate it. We all do, and I know we need to end, and time is an issue, and we haven't gone over this semester very much. I've gotten better at that. But I'm just wondering, can I ask one final question? Do you think we have time? And I was going to ask, if you're very brief, because we do need to end, is if you have any brief, just any memories of sort of something specific about Walter Rodney in particular, his visit, what he looked like, how he hung out, would he come to your house parties, was he
He allowed me
anything? I'm just really curious about it.
stick the sexism of Bill Strickland's behind. Boom!
Well, Pat Daly should be here,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she has great memories of Walter, and she says that Walter could be there and could present for an hour. And he could give you all the intellectual this, and this, and this, and this, but he could break it down so that you understood exactly everything he was saying. And that for her point of view, he was just fantastic at that. That Walter was so capable of taking all of this highbrow, scholarly stuff, abstract stuff, and just break it down so that you understood exactly what he was saying. And if she were here, she would talk more about Walter. And so I'm really hoping that we can get some things recorded, because she has great memories of Walter.
Is that pictures?
Walter was incredible. Yeah, he was an incredible. He and Strickland team taught this class, but clearly, if for anybody that was in it, Walter was the one who was the teacher for all of us. And I might have the syllabus at home. I need to look and see if I do. I may have the syllabus at home.
Yeah.
Now, I'm serious.
I really do. I think I do. So maybe I need to bring that and maybe put a copy in the Walter Rodney collection. Yeah, and but he was. I mean, his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, was kind of the subtext to the whole summer. And I mean, we evaluated everything we did in relationship to that book, and all the research that we were doing in whatever research everybody was working on.
Okay, let's get personal, because after your seminars, he came over to my house.
That's right.
Everybody came over to my house, and we're sitting around talking and doing whatever, and of course there's food, and
Food and wine.
And unfortunately, or whatever you want to call it, but it's the truth, Strickland had a habit of not doing any work. So it's my house, and I said, okay, the dishes are ready to be cleaned. And Strickland said whatever he said. Walter said nothing. He got up and went to the kitchen, and he stood at the sink. He said, okay, Waleed. I said, oh no, I'm drying dishes. You can wash dishes. I said, Strickland, what are you doing? That's what I mean about sticking it to him, okay? Because we were, at that point in time, now we have grown beyond that, but at that point it was really tension between the two of us. And if my sister were here, she would tell you a little bit more about it. You know who we didn't call? Chet Davis.
You mean we didn't call his name tonight?
Yeah.
I know.
I'm just saying Chet.
Yeah.
In the conversation, we didn't call Chet's name.
Well, it's
But
because
that's-
I was primarily trying to lift up
The
women.
women, of course. I
Yeah,
didn't
because the
cut
men
that
get
off.
lifted up
All the time. And I don't want it to sound as though I had major fights with Strickland. They were not. It was all, conceptual fighting of what is the purpose of what we're doing if we can't even correct our own selves. And Walter came around to show, let's do self-critical self-correction in a intellectual, academic, conceptual way, and then by his actions. Soft-spoken, quiet-spoken, could laugh like you can't believe, so that it was fun and it was not games, it was fun, but just set the tone. And I kept saying, so when you gonna get like that, Bill?
Well, it's a powerful and excellent note to end not just tonight, but the semester on. There's a lot to
Congratulations on
continue
the
from
class,
here.
yeah.
It's going to be an honor and a privilege to try to produce some knowledge out of this panel. And increasingly, you know, one of the models for this class is the IBW, you know, in addition to Vincent Harding's amazing class more recently. And I think it's time that we start to produce knowledge out of the class. We're trying to in various ways. So that's an exciting thing that we'll continue to work on.
And remember, we have graduate programs at MSU.
Keep that in mind. We've got some excellent contacts we're building here for a lot of different things. That's right. So MSU does have some really leading programs in Africana studies. And I was going to say also that hopefully we can get Pat Daly here next spring.
She just emailed me and said she was ready to do her presentation, and should I
Okay.
call her? And I said, we're finishing Q&A, and
Yeah.
we'll have to do this another time.
But she started thinking and preparing, so we'll
She
we'll
has
take
written
advantage
some
of that.
stuff
Yeah,
for
we'll get the
us.
written, we'll get her to
Yes.
visit, so we'll work on that, and I hope we can generate a lot of that moving forward. So we went long, so the sub-note is we have to ask everybody to exit relatively quickly and to
Because the
respect the
janitors
library and
get
all
in
that.
here.
That's right.
I think if we could, if, you know, Sue has some pictures, so I don't want it, like, I would say if we can be out in about 10.
Okay, cool.
So
So
let's
check
take
out, yeah, check out the
Everybody.
photo album she brought here. Thank you all for coming again, and thank you to our guests.
Leslie is my sister friend.
All right, I got to do that.
Oh, well, you can have this picture and then you can,
Oh, come on, Walk.
come on, you can hold it a second, you're not that old.
I really am.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, thank you, thank you. What's your name? Leslie Bray.
Okay.
Leslie is my
Thank you.
homeschool sister friend. And she is a continuation of IBW because she is my sister friend that I'm trying to communicate my stuff through. And so IBW lives. Yay.
Let us know when you get through, because you know I got this urgency going on.
I think we're good. It's good.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
All right.
You know where you're going? I don't. Thank you so much.
All right. You trying to let them see some pictures and stuff?